Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Straight Outta BS podcast. I want to thank you guys so much for being patient with me. Well, I got a new computer. Everything's figured out now, so I can record from my computer again. I want to thank all my Patreon members. Thank you so much. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, links are in the description. I want to do a moment of silence for the person still suffering with intrusive thoughts or anything like that. So on a count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. This staff or a nurse, I believe, at one of these W.W.A.S.P programs. So it is sort of a staff member, so this will be pretty interesting. So I look forward to it. Go ahead and introduce yourself and what program you worked at and what.
Oh, my name's Barbara Barnard. I worked at Piney Ridge in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is Acadia.
Okay. And can you walk us through like what led you to start working there and stuff like that?
Well, when I got my job there, I thought that it was drug rehab. And so I had been a school nurse. I went and applied, got the job, and then they said, oh, by the way, we have 100 kids, and they went into the whole thing, and I was kind of going to take a break from taking care of kids. And but I went ahead and took the job and opened up a whole new world. So I was there for a little over 2 years, I guess.
Okay. Did they do any sort of background check? Like what was like the interview process like? Because I'm very curious about that. I've heard from a lot of people that they don't even do background checks or anything like that. Did they do any like?
Well, they were supposed to do background checks. I found out after I had left and there was all kinds of investigations in and stuff. I believe, and I could be totally wrong, but it was somewhere around 50% of the background checks had not been done. There was a lot of background checks that had not been done. I know there were people working there who had criminal records.
Okay. So they didn't do one for you?
No, they did one for me. I'm assuming they said they did. They told everybody they were doing a background check, but in the big scheme of things, background checks were not being done consistently.
Okay. And did they go over any sort of training material with you?
Yeah,
Can you walk us through that?
You had in-service days that you had to go to before you went onto the floor, but I found a lot of it was if you were a new hire, you were put into a classroom, and there was not even an instructor in there, and they gave just big binders, and they were supposed to read through those binders. One thing that I figured out, is one of the reasons that the staff are so misled is that during training they do talk about the kids being manipulative. They lie. They want us to know that these kids are the worst of the worst. Once nobody else will take them, then we get them. We have to watch them. They'll, so it never was anything about treatment. It was about these kids being terrible kids and how they were going to manipulate us and how they were going to lie to us. And so you go into it thinking that these kids are terrible kids.
Okay, very interesting. What kind of scenarios did they go over with you? Like, did they go over like when kids ran, like what you're supposed to do? Like, what kind of scenarios did they go over with you, or did they not really do that?
It really wasn't so much that they gave specifics. We did the CPI training. They did. There really wasn't, it was more of you learned on the floor. You learned from the people who was already working there. So at the end of the day, their way of controlling the kids was with restraints. That was how they controlled the kids, with restraints, with taking their hot food away. That was one of the punishments. They'd get a hot or a cold MOU, a cold meal on the unit. And they may give them one for 2 weeks or 3 weeks where they go for that long with no hot meal at all. And that was a punishment. Being sent to the unit without the other kids was a punishment, which a lot of them, that was kind of nice. Just be away from everything. Putting them in the seclusion room. So that was always, the the rule of punishment.
Okay. What kind of restraints did they teach you how to do, or did they not teach you how to do those?
No, we had to be certified in CPI, which was physical restraints, but we also did a lot of chemical restraints. And so I know that in 1 month we did over, I want to say it was around 200 restraints in 1 month. That was chemical restraints. I don't remember. I know that we had one kid who was there for 3 years, and I estimated that during that time he probably got 800 chemical restraints.
And a chemical restraint, is that where they inject you with a drug or something like that? Is that?
Yeah. At our facility, it was Thorazine or Zyprexa and Benadryl. And it was always this, it's the same amount whether a kid is 8 years old and 70 pounds or 18 years old and 250 pounds. It was, you always gave the same dosage. So those little ones, they really got a lot,
Did you ever see anybody deal with health complications because of too high of a dose or anything like that?
I can't say as far as like a too high of a dose, but we had a little girl she was about 12, and she got so many chemical restraints that she started lactating. So she was getting so much antipsychotics that it caused this in her. And if they got them, they slept because they were getting 50 milligrams of Benadryl. Like I take 25, and so they slept a lot. You've seen the kids get hurt. You've seen kids with broken bones. Had a kid that was asthmatic that I was scared to death. He was going to have really bad issues. There is a lot of abuse with the restraints.
Would you get called out, say a student was misbehaving and you were supposed to, you were trained or whatever to restrain them in that sort of situation? If you didn't, were you bitched at? Were you yelled at? Were you reprimanded?
Well, what happened, the way it works is that, the floor staff is out there with the kids, and usually the nurses come separate after a restraint normally. Sometimes the nurses will call it, but the staff are the ones, a lot of times they would be in the classroom or whatever, and they would call us and say that there's a restraint in progress. So then we would show up after the restraint had already happened. But what happens a lot of times is they would ask for a restraint, and we would tell them no, because there was no need for a restraint to the kid. There's all kinds of options. But we would show up and we would say, no, we weren't going to give the kid a restraint. And as soon as we would leave, we would get a call over the radio, and they would have them in a restraint, and they would say it was because the kid had started acting out. That was they would end up in a restraint anyways. And there were times that I wouldn't sign off on them because there's absolutely no reason for 99% of the time, there was no need for a restraint.
Do you feel, being a staff member, do you feel that some of the staff members got off on inflicting pain or brainwashing the students
Well, I think that a lot of time there's a lot of staff that really did love the kids. It's hard working in an environment like that when it really is a power. It's a power thing for a lot of them, and there was people there who I think really enjoyed it, and then being understaffed, not having enough staff, not having the programming that the kids needed to have, kids having special needs that was not being addressed in the facilities, kids who had trauma, who's in these facilities, that's total chaos. And then a lot of the staff not knowing what to do with them. And when they're coming into the training and they're being told that these kids are terrible, they automatically assume, literally when I came on, that's what I thought my job was to restrain these kids. That's how it was laid out for us. And had I not worked in the school system before and understood kids with special needs, and I would have thought that they were right too. that caused a lot of animosity between me and my superiors.
Okay. What kind of stuff, like say you weren't showing up or you weren't restraining a lot of students, would they reprimand you in like, we're going to fire you, or would they like try and decrease your pay? What kind of consequences would they give you if you weren't?
Now, when I left, it was a night that, and I had been there for 2.5 years at this point, but I also had 2 lawyers. I was trying to stay as long as I could because we were trying to get as much information as possible. And so, but
So
when
you
I left,
became kind of like gathering intel type.
yes, yeah. So when I left with like 2 years worth of evidence of over restraints, of being understaffed, all kinds of stuff like that. But when I left, and I was very, very mad about, and I was one of the highest paid nurses there. I had just got a huge raise, so it wasn't like I was in bad terms with them. I was in actually good terms with them, but it was over restraining, and they told me that I could come back, but I would have to come back on a night shift, which I never worked night shifts, but I could come back night shift PRN, and that was, in my opinion, directly because of me, speaking up about it. It was more, you kind of got bullied by the floor staff because they wanted you to do restraints when you knew there shouldn't be a restraint. And so they would get really angry, and a lot of times they would antagonize the kids, so the kids would act up and end up in a restraint.
Yeah, kind of see if you reacted accordingly or whatever.
Yeah, because that's what they wanted, was the kid to be in a restraint, because then they didn't have to deal with them. And so they would antagonize the kid until the kid did have a meltdown. Yeah.
Okay. And did you try complaining to your superiors or whatnot? Well, not complaining, but did you try and like address your concerns to the superiors?
Very much. I have lots of emails where I have emailed my dean of nursing, where I had emailed the CEO of our facility. I have tons of emails where I had tried to get things, and it was just impossible. It was impossible. I have.
Would they just brush it off, or would they?
Yeah, no, they brushed it off. They brushed it off.
Like she's over exaggerating or something like that,
Yeah, or they would act like, they're going to do something about it, and nothing was ever done.
Interesting.
I do. I have lots of emails addressing it, and I have, emails to, well, different things to the State Department, to the governor's office, to the Attorney General's office. Like, I spent hours in the Attorney General's office. I spent hours at the governor's office. All these places with information, with, with proof of abuse, and the facility's still running.
It's still active today?
It is. It is. And there's actually several news articles on this facility that I was able to get out there. And they talk about DHS coming in and doing their investigations, talk about Arkansas Disability Rights coming in and doing their investigations, and the bad things that was there, and the discrepancies in, like, the background checks, the training. It's actually all in newspaper articles and in DHS findings and stuff. But no, it was never shut down.
Okay. Do they have any lawsuits pending against them?
As far as I know, they don't.
Okay.
What happens, and you probably know this, a lot of these kids come in from foster care.
Yep.
A lot of them come from, we were in Arkansas, and we would get them from Alaska and, Hawaii. Yeah. And they come in as foster kids. And, when you would have an incident and you would call their caseworker or whatever, tell them something happened, the caseworker wouldn't even know who the kid was. And so, and plus being taught that these kids were liars, everybody these kids are are made to feel like nobody's going to believe them, because that's what the staff is taught.
How long after you started working there did you start to realize that this is horrible, this is bad, they're torturing these kids?
I lasted, from my first go around, I lasted about 6 months, and I knew that something was wrong. I hated it. It was just, and so I applied.
Was it just like a feeling in your gut?
Yeah, yeah. But the way that they do it, I mean, it's like living in an abusive relationship, and like the high figure in your house is telling everybody a different story than what's actually going on. And so you're second guessing yourself. I think had I not worked in the school system and in special education and as a school nurse before, especially working with like the kids there who was autistic and they were getting put into restraints, I think that was probably my first clue. And they were getting into all this trouble because nobody had any clues about what an autistic kid was or what their needs were. And that was my first clue. And it didn't take very long for me to figure out that. And then you hate to leave because you hate for the kids to be left. And and I'd told people that if I worked in the school and the schoolhouse was on fire and I left those kids in there, like what kind of person would I be? I would never leave those kids. And what kind of person would I be if I just walked out the door and left without trying to take care of them just because I could, because it was easy for me to. And so yeah, it didn't take long for me to realize that and it's not even just, I mean, I know abuse is abuse, but it's such terrible abuse on so many levels. Abuse.
Well, yeah, it's such, we're so young when we go in there, like, some people may be like, yo, you're 16, you're like a teenager or whatever. Yeah, we're still fucking young. I'm 32 now, and that's twice the age that I was when I went in the program, and it still affects me.
Well, yeah, and we had kids in there that were 7 and 8. That's we would have a kid from Alaska there who's there for a year, and he's been put on an airplane and sent to this facility where he's going to be assaulted by the other kids. He's going to be there's zero affection, there's zero, like there's nothing there to nurture that kid. And and you have a whole room full of these kids where there is zero nurturing and there's zero empathy, and they miss out on that whole aspect of their life. And a lot of them has already been abused before they got there. Our facility was for sexually maladaptive children.
What does sexually maladaptive mean for people that might?
So they were in, some of them were in trouble for maybe touching a sibling or just sexually acting out. The majority of the time, these kids have been abused themselves. Almost always, these kids have been abused before they came there. And a lot of them, they're acting out because they're so broken and they're so angry and they don't know what else to do. And so
a lot of them probably tried reaching out, because I've had people that have tried reaching out, and as a result of reaching out, their parents actually sent them away because they said, oh, you're a liar, your father would never do that.
And a lot of times you would have a step parent come into the picture and the step parent didn't want to have them there. I know that there were times that paperwork was fudged to get the kid put there because there was nowhere else to put them.
Interesting.
And there were times that kids were put in there that the state would contract with the facility because they were a student that was in foster care or whatever, and there was nowhere to send them. So they would pay the state to allow this kid to stay in this facility. So automatically, because there are some kids in there who are predators. And so you put a kid in there who's very vulnerable, and they're going to get assaulted again. And then the facility's not keeping them safe. When a facility's taking $700-800 a day for one of those kids to be taking care of them, they better be taking care of them. Those kids should not be getting hurt and reassaulted inside that facility.
Did you witness any sexual assault from the staff to the students, or student to student, or hear about it?
Oh yeah, all the time. One of them that stands out, I had a little boy and there was a really big staff member, a male staff member that was on that floor, and they had some kind of a relationship that there was just something not right.
Like a grouping sort of situation?
Yeah. And this kid was this little tiny thing, and he was this huge, like 6 foot something guy. And at one point, the kid was in a restraint with this guy and he broke the kid's arm. And there was like a little investigation into it. He wasn't fired or anything. When I finally quit, I had staff members that were still working inside the facility would contact me and tell me the things that were going on so that I could report it. But this one staff member contacted me, and she told me that she had saw this specific staff member molest this little boy. She had watched him molest the little boy. She had turned it into her supervisor, and nothing had ever come of it. So when that happened, it made total sense, him breaking the kid's arm. There was something, I don't know if the kid's going to tell, or he was just trying to bully him or whatever. But and one of the reasons that I did leave also, I had a little boy who was from, I believe he was from Kentucky or Tennessee. He was like 12 years old, and he had an IQ of like 54, and he had been raped multiple times by his dad before he came there. We had another kid who was just this big old bully, and he was much bigger than this kid. So the kid came to us and told us that this kid had raped him. So we hotlined it. They came in and did an investigation, and they said that it was unfounded. Well, it was because the kid, once
So
they
they
started
call the
asking,
police? Is that what hotline means?
yeah, so they call the State Department, the kids hotline, the abuse hotline. So they came in, they did their investigation. They said it was unfounded because when they interviewed the kid, he changed his story several times. Well, this kid,
Well,
he's
he's
been there.
traumatized.
Yes, and he's got a low IQ. Well, the kid who did it, he just didn't talk. He didn't talk at all, and so they just said it was unfounded. Leave the kid in there with him, and that was like the last straw for me, because I knew that I couldn't speak out as loud as I needed to work in there as to keep them safe anymore. So when after I left, my coworkers, they were brought in randomly into the CEO's office, and they would have to give up their password to their Facebook and their social media to make sure that they weren't talking to me. And they were told if they talked to me that they were fired. So they would have to come in and give up their passwords for their, to make sure they weren't. But there was a lot of them that still did contact me, but there was all kinds of sexual abuse in there.
Okay. Once you started realizing that this is really fucked up, what things did you do to start to try and advocate for the kids? Like, I heard you gathering intel, having people that were working there send you information. What other kinds of things did you do to try and advocate for the kids?
I spoke to every state representative that I could find. Like I said, I went to Little Rock, to the state capitol, I just went and knocked on the governor's door at the state capitol, and I talked to everybody there that would talk to me. It ended up getting a interview with the Attorney General's office. A Medicaid fraud investigation was opened up on them, but just while I was there, I was collecting as much information as I could, because I felt like if I could prove that they were understaffed, which they had documented the staffing books and stuff, that would be something. Different times there were different things. I called the fire marshal. They had locked the doors. They'd put a four-wheeler up against one of the doors, the exit doors, because the kids kept breaking out of it. And so they had put a four-wheeler up against it. So if something had happened, those kids couldn't have got out. They couldn't have got out. And that was their solution to the problem, to put a four-wheeler up against the door. speaking to anybody that would allow me to speak to them. But while I was in there, my biggest thing was the kids knowing that, and that's still the thing is I hope the kids, I told one of the kids, he asked if I was going to quit, and I told him no, and I didn't plan on it at the time, and I ended up having to. And that's the one thing is that I hope that he knows that just because I quit the facility, that I didn't quit fighting for them. I told him I would die in the streets starving before I quit fighting. I worked with organization in Chula Vista in California, where there was a facility trying to go in there, and we did a lot of open letters to try to keep it out. It was at first it was approved, but I think since then that's been scrapped. So that facility will not be going in there. I did the legislative committee with Paris Hilton with those guys. I just.
So you're pretty well connected with the survivor community then.
Yeah, I am because I think it's important that nurses and staff do speak out, and a lot of them are scared. They're scared to speak out.
I've had 2 staff members out of the 72 episodes I've done so far. You know, it's very far in between, and I'm thank you so much for coming on the podcast, because it's so important to get your perspective, you know, and not all of you are bad, you know, you're not bad people. None of you are bad people. Well I'm sure there's a few bad people.
But there are really good ones there who are scared to death to leave because they have to leave the kids. And something else that they were really bad about was threatening, you know, if there was a investigation into one of the kids for abuse or whatever, they were threatened that their own personal kids could be taken away. And so they were scared to death to do anything because they were scared of their own kids being taken away.
So the staff members' kids?
Yes. Yeah. So
the program would threaten to take their kids.
It was the Department of Human Services. They would get a letter in the mail saying that if these things were found to be true, that they stood to have their children removed from the home also. And so that put it to where they had to really make it look like the kid had done something wrong. And it was, you know, so that kid didn't have any chance. Yeah.
About medications, did they take children off medications and like, you know, cold turkey, or because I noticed they either do that or they load them up with drugs? What did they do at this facility?
They had, you know, the kids had to go in and see the psych doctor, you know, fairly often, and they would go over their medications. I don't personally know of them just taking a kid off of a medication. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I didn't usually give the meds. We had a med nurse, and she's the one that gave the meds. So I'm not sure about that. I was very, you know, you have a kid who may have like strep throat or some kind of, you know, running a fever. The kid wasn't able to go back into their rooms during the daytime. And they weren't allowed like a pillow or blanket or anything. And that's something that just bothers me still, is these kids laying on the hard floors with no blanket, no pillows, running a fever, have their arms down in their shirts to keep them warm. Like dogs at the Humane Society, they throw a rug or towel out for them. You know, these kids had less dignity than an animal at an animal shelter. Their medications, you know, they were very, of course they wanted the kids medicated because it made their life easier, whether it was the right medications or whether, you know, the kid had ADHD or they were just suffering from trauma, you know, that was a big gray area, I think, that they were treating stuff that was to keep the kid in control rather than, you know, treating them.
Okay. What percentage of because I know that you have your degree, right? Like your okay. What percentage do you think, from your observation, of quote unquote doctors on the facility actually had certification?
the nurses, they all did, but as to be a floor staff, like you just had to have a high school diploma, like zero. They didn't have to have any kind of training before they came. They didn't have to have any kind of schooling that was specific to this. There was nothing. There was nothing that they had to have, and most of them didn't have anything. It was mostly. Now I'll have to say the doctor that we had, he was this hard-nosed man, but he really loved the kids, and he would buy them shoes and he would buy them coats. He didn't want the kids to know it was from him. But anytime he saw a kid that needed something, he would have his wife go get it and bring it for the kids, because there were kids, you would see kids who their shoes were completely, they didn't have soles on their shoes. They were duct taped together. I've seen them walk into the schoolhouse, you have to walk through the playground, and it was a cement sidewalk, but literally in the snow with socks on, and the facility, if the kid, if their parents couldn't afford to send them something else, well, we would get donations from different people or whatever. And then again, if somebody's paying $800 a day to take care of this kid, that kid needs shoes. But this doctor would get them shoes and stuff. But that was just another example of how abusive and how money hungry these people are.
Did they train you for what to do if somebody ran?
When these kids ran, it was all, they chased them down. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing because literally they would get into company truck, company van, whatever, chase these kids down through the neighborhood. We did have a little boy, and I still think about him a lot. He was 17 and he ran away, and they never found him. And there was no code Adam. There was nothing, on the local news saying there's a missing kid for literally 9 months. There was finally 9 months later, there's something, he's never been found. He's never been found, but literally 9 months later, there was a newscast asking if people had seen this kid. And as far as I know, he's still on the missing kids list. But they only called the police if it was absolutely, they had to call the police. They did not want the police in there. They didn't want the fire department in there. We were told that if they did come, that they were only allowed into the front break room. That was as far as they were allowed in. But when a kid would run, it was just all the staff available would run after the kid, chase them through the neighborhoods. I've seen them get chemical restraints in the parking lot, in a physical restraint in a parking lot of the local, I don't know, the little strip mall, like a mile from the facility. It's just very inhumane, very unorganized, very barbaric.
See, how long did you work there?
About 2.5 years.
Okay. And did they did you ever spend any time in solitary confinement, like watching the kids or anything like that?
A lot. The seclusion room to me was, is inhumane. I don't, at this facility, it was about maybe 5-6 feet wide square, cement blocks, cement floor. The kids, they get in there and they hit their heads on the wall and they would, bleed all over the place. And it was right, like the day room where all the kids was, it was just a door off the day room. So then all the other kids could watch this kid be in confinement in the room. Towards the end, I went in and I painted the seclusion rooms and made a nice little moon and stars, and I put a little tent in there. I put different things in there because there's no reason. I just can't hardly think of a reason why one of these kids would need to be locked in there. And honestly, it worked better than just letting them go in there and sit down. I mean, when you're in a room with all these kids and it's so loud and it's so, I would go crazy too. I would have a meltdown too.
Well, when we do it to our prisoners, they even talk about how it's inhumane to do it to people, to actual criminals that have actually committed crimes. Like, but we do it to our teenagers and our children.
I've been went into prison nursing after that. And so I have been in a lot of prisons. And these prisons are so much more humane than the facilities.
Yeah.
They are absolutely
it's craziness.
I went to one of the other nurses that I worked with at the facility. We worked at a prison together. We worked really well together. We had the same, thoughts on the facility. Me and another nurse got sent down to one of the prisons. We all had to go take a turn at this one prison that didn't have enough nurses. They had come back. They were like, I'm never going back there. The girl I took with me, she cried. And I told the nurse that I was with, it was nothing compared to Piney. It was absolutely nothing compared to Piney. It was so much better. Like, and these nurses who was crying, they have no idea what they were, because these people got so much more respect and so much more. These kids are treated like they are less than nothing.
Yeah.
And then we expect them to go out in society and function. And I found in the prison is filled up with kids that we've had in facilities, because they have, it's funny that I'm in Washington now, and we had a guy. I know I'm about 2 hours south of you in Tokeland, down by you start reading the jackets of the prisoners, and it's these kids that fell through the cracks in the facilities, and a lot of times there's terrible people in prison. Then there's a lot of people in prison who have had terrible lives and nobody took up for them, and they've had to survive all this time. And then when they get out in society and they're trying to survive and breaking the law, then they end up, and they would have been good people. They would have been good people.
Well, yeah, and a lot of these kids didn't have a father or a mother in the home, so they didn't have strong role models. And even some of them that did, they still
were so terrible. Yeah. No, I totally agree. We've filled up the prison system. It's our own fault. And and a lot of the prisoners, like they weren't born thinking they were going to be, criminals. It's not what
today I want to go murder somebody. Yeah, it's not.
No, it is, they have had to survive their whole lives, and the adults who were supposed to take care of them never did. No.
Was there anything positive that you saw about the program that you worked at? And what was the worst thing that you saw there?
Positive wise, there were people there who absolutely did care for these kids, and would try to do things for them. And some of these kids, like when they left there, as bad as it was, I wanted them to feel like they had been treated the best there that they had been treated anywhere else. Because a lot of them, they just go from facility to facility. Like, they don't have homes to go to. They're going to go to a different facility after they leave there. But I seen, especially the night shift when the office workers weren't there, it was a no-touch facility. So we weren't supposed to, but you have a 7 or 8 year old boy who's there from Alaska, and they're crying, they're homesick, they don't, and you can't touch them, and you can't. And so I've seen staff members sing bedtime things to them, read to them. I used to like to stay and read to some of the middle-aged boys at night, because we always got read to. These kids had never been read to at night, and at nighttime was when a lot of bad things used to happen to them. And so you have a hard time getting them to settle down, because this is a bad time for them. And so we'd read to them. the system doesn't allow you to take good care of them. The way that it is set up, the way that it is ran, does not allow you to take good care of these kids, even if you wanted to. You know, as far as bad things, I've seen a lot of bad things. Like I said, the sexual assault. To me, the physical and the chemical restraints, especially the chemical restraints, was as close to being sexually assaulted as you can get with that. You know, you got a kid who's having a meltdown and all of a sudden they're in a restraint in front of all their peers. You know, somebody's grabbing them. These kids probably a lot of times have already been sexually assaulted before they came there. So then you have these big adults tell them to that they're going to restrain them, that they've, you know, you've got to calm down or you're going to get, you know, you're going to get shots or whatever. Well, the kid's obviously going to go into a panic, yes, and try to save themselves, and so they do fight. And so the next thing you know, they're down on the ground and they've got 4 or 5 or 6 big people on top of them, and then tell them they got to calm down. They're not going to calm down. And then the next thing you know, they're pulling their pants down and giving them these shots. And like I said, a lot of times it's in front of their peers, and they'll urinate on themselves, you know, and then they'll just give them a towel and make them clean it up themselves. So that's in front of their peers. And you got a 15, 16-year-old boy that this has happened to or whatever. Like, how humiliating is that? And for human beings to treat them like that is just beyond me. And then for other human beings to allow it to happen and keep allowing it to happen is just, it's unbelievable.
When you started speaking out, were there people that started hating on you for it?
Yes, a lot. Yeah. When I first left the facility, the nurses that I worked with and stuff, a lot of them, they were so mad at me. And
did they give you a reason why they were mad?
Because they honestly thought that they weren't doing wrong, because that is how they're trained, is that these kids, you can't do anything else with them. And
in a way, the staff are brainwashed too. You know?
Yeah, it is. That's what I say. It is like an abusive relationship where everybody in the family is brainwashed into thinking that everything outside is wrong. It's people don't understand what's going on inside. They don't know how bad it is here and what we have to do to keep it under control. Those people don't understand, but we do. And so that's how it is presented to them. And so, yeah, so when I left, yes, I had, it really bothered me because my close friends, like, they were very mad at me over it. And since then, a lot of them they're on the same page as me now. Once I had one of them message me about a year later, and she said, "You were right. You were totally right." But it is, they're scared of retaliation. They're scared of losing their jobs. You know, a lot of they're not high paying jobs, and they're scared of losing their jobs. And so, you know, this environment, they've been in this environment and it's almost becomes like normal. And so they think if somebody is speaking out that they're crazy. But once they've got away from the situation and looked at it, they realize how terrible it really was. Yeah.
How was the food there, in your opinion? Was it edible? Was it decent? Was it horrible?
Yeah, no, I feel like it was decent. We ate the food. The staff ate the food too. It was at our facility. It was fairly decent. I was totally against when they would give them the cold meals on the unit for whatever reason. You know, they would, you know, anytime they got in trouble, that was one of the punishments, you know, that they would have to eat a cold meal. So, you know, and I know they got their calories, but when you've got a kid who they have no nurturing, they have nothing, and then you give them cold food, like it's just like the bottom of the barrel, you know. And so they got a sandwich, some carrots, some pretzels for lunch and dinner, and for breakfast they got a granola bar and yogurt is what they got for breakfast. And so day after day, you know, they get a cold meal. So not only are they pegged as the bad kid, It's just like they did whatever they could to make them feel even lower than what they were.
Okay. This program, was it points and levels and seminar based, or was it a religious program? What?
It wasn't really. It was Acadia Healthcare, which a lot of these facilities are Acadia. It was on the points. I was trying to think how theirs was on their levels.
Merits and demerits.
Yeah, and then they would get dropped back down if they misbehaved or whatever, and they may have worked really hard to get to a certain point, and all it would take is for one floor staff who was in a bad mood or had no idea what to do or whatever, we get that kid's work completely taken away from them.
Yeah.
And then the kid would have a meltdown. It's such a cycle. The kid would have a meltdown, then they would end up in a restraint, and then they would, and it was all because this one staff person, they were the weak link.
Did you see staff pick favorites and
Oh yeah,
pick certain other students? Okay, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you always see that. It seems like, each staff member will have a favorite one, and they'll, kind of baby them or whatever. I don't know if they just maybe they recognize something in the kid that I don't know, but and then you have the students, of course, who nobody does like, and so they get picked on. They get in trouble when they shouldn't be getting in trouble. Anytime I think you work with, especially unprofessional people who haven't been trained, like people who have no idea what's going on, all they know is they have these kids who are misbehaving, and a lot of times the staff comes from homes where they've also been abused. A lot of these staff, they come in thinking that they're going to be able to help kids that were raised like them. And then they get in there and they can't handle it because they all of a sudden become on the same level as these kids. And it almost becomes like an older sibling, younger sibling dynamic. And there's fighting and there's bickering and they're not trained to take care of these kids. Not only are they not trained to take care of these kids, they're still suffering from trauma that happened to them. And so they go to this place where they're in, it's almost like a sibling dynamic.
Let's see. Did you hear about students getting threatened with being shipped off to other programs? Did you hear about?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. Yeah, they would tell them, and some of them did. But yeah, they were threatened with that, or to go to juvie, we're going to send you to juvie, or and something else that I saw happen was parents being threatened to be turned into the State Department if they took them out of the facility. If the parent,
Wow.
Yeah, so if the parent wanted to take them out, and these facilities will keep them as long as the insurance will pay. As soon as the insurance quits paying, they're out like the next day. And so what happens is they'll put them in one of these programs. They'll go as long as the insurance will pay. And then they'll say to the parent, well, they didn't finish the program. They didn't do well enough to pass the program, whatever. We suggest that you send them to this other facility. Well, this other facility is owned by the same company. And the parent may be against that. They may want to take them home. Well, then they will threaten the parent that, well, if you're going to disagree with what the doctor says needs to be done, then we're going to file a complaint with Human Services over, non-compliant with medical care. And so these parents are bullied into letting their kids stay longer because all the professionals are saying these kids they have to be here. They haven't done well enough to leave. So what happens is then insurance pays again because they haven't been cured yet. So they'll send them to another facility where they're cash cows. They will milk that money as long as they can, and all they have to do is tell the parents that they're going to turn them into DHS, and the parents back off, and they hold all the power. And so these kids get shifted around to facilities all the time, nonstop, and they're literally the parents. And it goes back to the abusive relationship. The parents are being told by these doctors and this therapist that this kid hasn't succeeded in the program, and they're the therapist, they should know. And so so they listen to the therapist, the director, or if they do push to bring them home, then they get threatened to have their kids taken away, and they're really put in a spot where they can't do anything about it, or they don't think they can do anything about it.
Okay. When you first were getting this job, did they make you sign any sort of NDA or anything like that, like within like the contract that or did they make you sign
Just HIPAA. I probably had to sign something. I don't know. I mean, literally, like they just give you packets of stuff to sign, and you just sign it. But we were not allowed to, like I said, we were not allowed to call the cops. And it can get dangerous in there if you have a kid that is very, and all the other kids are very vulnerable. But we were not allowed to call the cops. We were not allowed to bring outside agencies in. It was left up to the nurses and the floor staff. There was no security there. So it was left up to us to keep these kids safe. We had a group of girls that one night they broke the window out, and then they used the glass to do a lot of damage and different things, and a lot of them ran away, and it puts all the kids in danger. It's not just those kids that ran away, all the kids are in danger now. And but still, yet there wasn't the staff to keep these kids safe.
Okay. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I'm just kind of curious, how much were they paying you when you started?
Oh, I don't mind. And Arkansas is a lot different than here.
Yeah.
So I had gone from being a school nurse, which doesn't pay very well at all. When I started there, I was getting paid $20 an hour, which is way low for a nurse. But for me, that was like $8 more an hour than the hospital offered me. When I left, they had just given me like a 58% raise because I was supposed to be training the staff on keeping the kids from being restrained, because I strongly felt, and I believe, that 99% of the restraints could be avoided.
Yeah.
And they had given me, I think I was making $28 an hour when I left, there was one nurse that was making more than me at the time. So, and for where I live, that's fairly average. So I know a lot of the floor staff, like we had a food bank set up so that the floor staff who couldn't afford to eat, we would, we give them food and stuff, like they were paid that little. I think they were probably making minimum wage.
Okay. Did you get any sort of like bonuses or incentives for like doing more restraints or anything like that? Like
No, we didn't. It wasn't anything like that. They would ask us not to do restraints. They wanted the restraint level to be down, but then they did nothing to make that happen. It was empty. Like if they're saying that not to do the restraints, then if somebody asks, they can say, we told them not to do this many restraints, but they did nothing to do anything about it. And so it was just an easy thing for them.
Okay. After you got out of the program and like up till currently, like what are you currently, like are you still advocating?
Yes.
Okay. What are you currently doing?
As I can. I got to do a documentary with some of the group from Breaking Codesilence.
Cool.
Yeah. One of the girls who lives here in Aberdeen, amazingly, she moved here like 3 months after I did. And I had met her in the group on a Skype meeting back, I don't know, a couple years ago, her nephew was in a facility and she'd been trying to get him out, and he was only there because he was in foster care and they had in Utah, and she could not get him out. Like, she had done everything, and they were fixing to put him up for adoption. And here she's the aunt, and she's trying to get custody of him, and they're not allowing her to. And
there was a case actually at the place I went where they actually had a court order issued and they still wouldn't.
Was that recently?
It was about like 10, 12 years ago or something.
Okay. Well, this one, that was like, she did everything, and they got us in touch. I was able to tell her some things that go on inside. We were, and it ultimately came down to her finding out like the chemical restraints and stuff and what they do and what they give. And she went to the facility and started questioning them about that. And they let him out. And so I got to go to his birthday party this year. A couple months ago, he turned 16, and I got to go to his birthday party, but they weren't going to let him out. And it was because of breaking code silence and being in that group that we were able to get him out. But yes, any parent, I wish would, if they would ask me, because the parents don't believe the kids. Nobody believes these kids.
Well, also the parents are also brainwashed as well.
Exactly. Yes, because yeah, the professionals are saying this is what needs to be done, and we're trained to believe everything that professionals tell us, and it just leaves these kids totally vulnerable. They're totally they are a cash cow for a system, is what they are. I think that it's all. I mean, it's a form of human trafficking. And I think that probably the facilities in a lot of ways are warehouses for human trafficking, is what I believe.
Okay. For any like nurses that are maybe working in a program like this, they may have just gotten out of it. How could they, for people like that or people in general that want to get involved, how can they advocate? Like, what would you suggest them doing? How
I got started, I guess, was before, it was before Breaking Code. It was before a lot of those. I started my own Facebook page, just putting stuff out there, putting any article out there that I read concerning it, making it known that, if a parent wanted to talk to me, that I am, I will stand up for those kids. I will vouch that these things happen to these kids. And I've had a lot of people message me. One thing that we did, like I said, a lot of the staff was scared to write emails. They were scared. And so I set up email addresses that were just like anonymous 1, anonymous 2. And so I would give them a password. They would log in and they would write down what happened, and they would log out, and then I would log in from home, and I sent it to every senator, every person that I could think of, because they were scared of it being tracked back to them. So tell them to get a hold of me. Like, there's people out there who it's getting to be more well known, and I think people are starting to believe a little more. But their instincts are right. Their instincts are totally right. They what they think is wrong really is wrong, no matter what the office is telling them. It's wrong. They know it. They know it is.
Do you still have nurses reaching out to you and telling you stuff about what's going on in these programs, or possibly maybe even Acadia?
Yeah, from time to time I do. And what we do is we will, we'll hotline it. We will, whatever, like I said, I've called the fire marshals in the city. I've called, whoever that needs to be notified of what's going on. For one thing, and a lot of the way that they train a staff about making a hotline call is that you're supposed to give it to your supervisor, and your supervisor, then we send it on up to another supervisor, and they decide whether or not it's a hotlineable offense or not, which is totally illegal. It is that person who saw its responsibility to hotline it. They have no idea. They are led to believe that they are supposed to turn it in to a supervisor, and the supervisor will make that decision. It's not the supervisor's decision to make. So that's something else that staff, I think, is not told is that it's their responsibility to hotline those things. It just giving it to the supervisor isn't enough.
Okay. Did you how close were you to the CEO of, or like the owner of Acadia? Did you get to know him? Any
It was a her, and yeah, I mean, I interacted with her every day, but she was very, she had a child with autism, and I couldn't believe that she would allow kids that had problems to be treated the way that they were treated. Her having a child that had special needs, she ended up resigning when I left and started all the investigations. She ended up resigning. I don't know what she's doing now, but under the investigation, she did resign. I'm not sure. I've tried to contact the CEO since then. None of them will talk to me. So, and I've messaged them multiple times. I've messaged the CEO of Acadia. I've tried to get hold of them. Nobody wants to talk to me.
The sense that you got when you were around her, did you sense that she genuinely wanted to help, or did you sense that she kind of got off on?
No, I think that it irritated her that we felt like something was wrong. It was like, this is her house and she's running it the way it should be ran, and how dare us? Yeah. Like how, she's very wealthy, very, and that was one thing that really made me mad. I guess I'd seen on Facebook one weekend, the kids were just like, they have no clothes, they have no shoes. And then I see she was like at some kind of baby shower in her big, nice house and stuff. And I thought, how low to be living this wonderful life at the expense of these kids. These kids are paying for your lifestyle that you've got going on here.
Yeah, it's blood money.
It is. It really is. And that's what I thought. And so, yeah.
Wrapping up here. How do you think we fix this? How do we go about fixing things, in your opinion?
The other staff are going to have to speak out. They're going to have to speak out, because it's one thing for me to speak out. I just become a crazy person, and this isn't funny, but it's just ironic. I got a divorce last year, and my ex, he was like, well, I think what's happened is that you're an empath and you worked in this facility, and you're just taking on their trauma, and now you think it's yours. And I'm like, no. So that's that. They make you feel like you're crazy. They want you to, because one person's the only one speaking out. But once the other staff, they've got to start understanding that it is wrong, and that they can stand up. But also when they see somebody standing up and nobody, addressing it, I think they probably are discouraged. Like, well, they're not doing anything about it anyways, and if I speak up, I'm going to lose my job. And so they go back into the shadows. I think that the government is so wrapped up in it. Government-wise, it is going to take a huge upset. I don't know, but I do believe, look at Mitt Romney. He basically started Acadia, and he's made like $500 million off of them. So he's, a lot of those politicians are getting a lot of money off of these facilities. That's how they're making millions of dollars, is on these facilities. And they don't want to give it up. And so it's going to take, like, I am so very, very, very proud of you guys. Like, you guys have not, I feel like a mother hen. I am so proud of you guys for stepping up and doing, like, I've seen how far you guys have come in the last couple of years, and how amazing that you guys have had to live in these facilities and still be able to get out and form this movement to stop it. Like, I'm so proud of you guys. I feel like a proud little mama knowing that you guys have done this, because it's difficult and it is impossible seemingly, and you guys are the ones that were hurt. And so, yeah, I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, so you'd say in general, just educating. Essentially what I'm doing is just educating.
Keep educating, yes, because you guys, looking back from where, where you guys started, like how much of a movement you guys have already, just by the things that each one of you guys are doing and standing up and showing how many people are saying. And that's one of the things that I said at the beginning was, it would have been one thing if it was just the things that I had heard, in my facility. But every single and I talked to people from facilities all over the United States, and every single one of them said the same thing. I mean, it was you could have taken the name off of it, and it could have been Piney Ridge and Fayetteville.
Yeah. Every
one of them. And you can't tell me that it's all lies. It's not. It's not. It's happening in every one of these facilities. So for you guys to stick together, I think that's the biggest thing, is you guys sticking together. And, it may take a long time, but I think that you have the world watching. I do. I think that you guys are, every day there's, I see every day where there's facilities that are being investigated, facilities that are closing. And I know for you guys, as adults, you were there as kids, but you guys are standing up for the kids that are there now, and these kids someday will know that there was adults fighting for them, because while they're in there, I don't think they know that there's adults fighting for them.
For sure. All right. What else do you want in closing? What else would you want people to know, or what would you tell a parent thinking about sending their kid here? Never
send them. Never send those kids there. I can't think of a reason why. I know that the parents sometimes are overwhelmed. I know the state is telling them things. I know, that it's not just usually a matter of just sending them there just because. There's so much more going on. But be sure, and I'm assuming there's facilities out there that are good. I'm just so leery of any of them. It just scares me. I want, if there's parents out there, and I've told people this, I will go to court. I will go to court and vouch that these things happen. I feel like there's other people who worked in these facilities that would too, that, if there's somebody out there that needs, that's what I want them to know, is that I have been in there. I have seen it. I know what goes on. And I will, like I said, I will die on the street starving before I stopped fighting for these kids. And that's, I feel like I'm a voice of what really happens in there, and I'm willing to speak to anybody about it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to thank you, and I think it's awesome that you're speaking out. I want to invite anybody that's watching the video, if you guys have any questions for her, if I get a bunch of questions, then we can probably do a part 2.
That would be great.
If you think about anything that you had forgotten or whatnot, just take some notes. We'll do a part 2. I'd like to do a part 2 regardless, because I feel like you as a staff member, I want to get as much information as I can out of you, because I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge. I also want to invite, if you watch this far in the video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share. Let's keep on getting this information out of there, educate as many people as possible, and get this out into the general sphere of people, because right now it's starting to get out there in the algorithm, but we need to get it out there to the general public. So just keep on sharing it, share, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jordan. Bye.